we're playing around with, I think I've mentioned this before, but the possibility of having sort of servers in the same data server all working together on the same area or instance. Doing that will potentially be able to have more players in an area than one server can simulate. This is still very early, but that's one of the sort of approaches that we're looking at. We're planning to have sort of seamless server transitions and basically mesh the servers together. So it's like, okay, I'm updating these people, but there's one guy that's over here that's coming towards you, and you've got a guy over here. So this server's saying, oh, this is where this guy is, so this server knows and has a sort of copy of him in his memory space, and vice versa. So you can sort of basically resolve overlaps between sort of server control areas. And so that's kind of the idea is, as more and more people come in, you spin up more and more servers, and they all mesh together, so you can ultimately have, you know, hundreds, if not thousands, of people all simulating essentially in the same instance. Actually, a more advanced and I think ultimately better solution than what we'd talked before, which was sort of much more sort of instance on top of each other, and you can only ever see, you know, 30 other people or 50 other people or whatever it would be. And I think that it's going to be good. So that's what we're working towards. I think it's going to be a pretty cool experience. I'm actually quite excited by the tech that we're working for this. You know, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a lot of time because we're building something that's really, you know, we're right on the cutting edge of this kind of stuff.
Now we're going to hear from Clive. He's going to give you guys some insight into the programming work that's going into the networking refactor.
Ultimately, where we're trying to get to is get the game servers talking to each other, which will take Star Citizen from being an online game to a massively multiplayer online game.
Another feature that's got me really stoked is the server transition technology, which is going to break down the walls between the isolated server instances and start to finally push all of the players within the game together. That's a bit farther out because we have to replace all of the low-level CryEngine network code, but it's going to have a huge impact across a wide spectrum of gameplay, and ultimately it's going to make the entire world feel much more alive.
Some of the stuff we're doing on the network, where we're going to have this sort of mesh of servers, so we'll be able to have, hopefully, you know, a large amount of players all in the same area, so we don't have to instance it in the way that originally we were thinking we're going to have to instance it. We have a kind of different server design now that could potentially have thousands of players all in the same sort of area.
We've already got persist, so we can already, you know, save player state and restore it, you know, to a particular configuration, you know, as you join a game, and that's already 75% of the way there. But Chris wanted to, you know, push the game to, you know, to a farther level versus, you know, what all these other games that approach this problem have done, and
that may allow us to have 2,000 people in the same area or whatever. But you know, what if there was meant to be 10,000? And then at that point, we probably would still have to instance, but.
We will do, you know, aim to do a test of that system at some point next year, to where we basically band a number of servers together, you know, creating, you know, a shard, you know, of sorts, to where we're testing the concepts that we're talking about here, but on a much more localized scale. And this should ramp the game up to, don't know, you know, right now, but it should be hundreds of players in a given, you know, in one of these meshes.
The really important thing is all the work they've done is actually is the basis of the server transition stuff, which is what we need to really get a bunch of players in there.
Right.
So when we can have, you know, when we can have a server control anything from a room, if we want to have a load of people in that room, to a system, and then we can transfer people seamlessly from server to server. Then all of a sudden we can put everybody in one game universe, because all we do is we just increase the amount of servers depending on how many people are in there, and then if there's a very popular room on a single planet, then we may just say, you know, God, there's like 500 guys want to be in that room. All right, we'll have just one server that cares about that room, and when they walk out that room, they'll then pass it to another server, which is then controlling the road outside, and stuff like that, and so forth and things.
What will be the extent of the first pass on the server meshing plan for 3.4? For the first pass version, we'll probably divide the Stanton system into sections and have one server manage each section. Once the initial version has been put through its paces, we will continue to improve and refine the technology with future pre-alpha releases, incrementally bringing us closer to the final goal of a single shard universe.
What network enhancements beyond what is listed for 3.4 are needed before we can have two systems connected by a jump point?
So beyond 3.4. So 3.4, we've got on the roadmap server migration. So we have to build the server migration tech, server meshing tech first, and then we'll see if we can utilize it that way.
Fair enough. It's still the question was still a bit far out there.
The final plan is obviously once we get the server meshing in, that won't be this year, but that will be coming in next year, that will allow everyone to play in one huge instance with all the players.
And then the final part obviously is the server meshing, when we'll be able to, so I think what will happen is with the object container streaming and then moving to batch model physics, we'll be able to get the player count on any one server to at least 200 or so. And then the server meshing will allow us to go quite a bit beyond that in terms of people in areas or instances in the closed space. And then that world becomes truly massive, and everyone can sort of exist in the same area and venture around and live their virtual life.
And when we get to the full persistence of server meshing, I think at that point, that's when we're not going to be resetting the servers. It's when it will be an ongoing, living, breathing game. And that, I'm not going to give you a date, but
obviously the big one for us, which is when I feel the game's going to be ready for prime time, which is when we get the server meshing in, when we can put a bunch of people in one system. At the moment, we're in planning phase right now, and the work will start soon afterwards, and we'll be working on it this year.
And then the final version of that is that's just sort of fluid. It's always just spinning up and adding servers as it needs it for load. So that's kind of what we are working on that right now. So we have our top men, and then we really have top men, not the Raiders of the Lost Ark version of top men.
So you're envisioning world-scale environments that have thousands of people in them at once. Absolutely, and we're quite far along on the tech to deliver that. With the new cloud power, we're going to be able to do this thing we call server meshing, which allows a whole bunch of servers to run in the cloud and talk to each other. If they all mesh together, you could have all 4,000 people or 40,000 people in the same world at the same time. If everything's in the cloud, there's almost no time difference to talk between servers and clients, and there really isn't any difference between the two. The quality of a multiplayer experience will increase because you'll have much less latency. You won't have any issue of cheating. You eliminate the issues you get with lag.
And then the last thing, which we won't, I think, get to by the end of next year, but we'll be very close to it, is server meshing. And so everything we've been doing up until then, and that's when I think everything fully comes alive.
We're also looking at getting two servers talking to each other, which may surprise some people that that's not the first thing that we did. But it kind of was, because obviously the first thing you try when you're trying to build server meshing is you just try and connect two servers together and you see what happens. And we weren't really expecting it to work, and we weren't too surprised when it didn't. But it was quite a useful exercise, and it showed kind of what didn't work and what we would have to change to make it work. So we kind of built those tasks out, and people are working through them right now.
I think overall, it sounds like between the conversations with you and Chad that we're making some pretty good progress. We're generally happy with where we're at.
Server meshing is another big technical milestone ahead of us. This will allow us to greatly expand the number of the players beyond 50 to thousands concurrently in the same instance. The question is no longer if, but when.
Longer term, we've obviously got some major initiatives still on the horizon, like server meshing.
It's with the advent of server meshing on the horizon. And
the answer should be simple. Allow multiple instances of the game server to work together so they can split up the work. Well, it's not quite that simple. It's an exponential problem, as in the worst case, each node would need to talk to each other node in the mesh, severely limiting our ability to scale it. To solve this issue, we are separating simulation and replication. Instead of just meshing multiple dedicated game servers together and have them synchronize state between each other, we are introducing a new layer called replication layer.
We'll then follow up with the first version of a static server mesh, barring any unforeseen technical complications, between Q3 and Q4 of next year. We are aiming for the end of Q1 2023, but again, We really will not know with confidence until it hits testing. We are aiming to put static server meshing and Pyro into the hands of players in the fourth quarter of 2023. 2023.